This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. Liverpool beat Real Madrid 1-0 in the Champions League, but for Thibaut Courtois, it would have been much, much more. This was Arne Slot's side's best performance of the season. Last year's midfield three, all brilliant, and Conor Bradley giving Vinicius absolutely nothing, while the panto of booing Trent Alexander-Arnold happened over on the other side. Elsewhere, Micky Van de Ven turns into Heung-min and Gareth Bale at the same time and scores the kind of goal you see in a computer game and immediately think this game is unrealistic. You don't get those goals in actual football. Arsenal win and get a clean sheet, obviously. Also, there's a statement win for Bayern at PSG. We'll look back on Sunderland's draw with Everton, Gary O'Neill turning down Wolves, and discuss Mary Earps and Hannah Hampton. As always, we'll answer your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hi, Max.
Welcome, Johnny Liew.
Hello.
And hello, Nicky Bandini.
Morning.
Let's start there at Anfield. Liverpool won, Real Madrid 0. Brilliant performance from Liverpool. And we kind of said on Monday that maybe Liverpool weren't as back as some has reported. But this feels, Johnny, like a very significant result and a win they totally deserved.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant performance, actually. And I think there is always a danger, and I think we've seen this not just with Liverpool, but with all the big clubs this season, there's always a tendency to overreact to one result, one performance. You know, Liverpool were, they were going to walk the title earlier, weren't they? And then they were incredibly lucky, and then they were finished in crisis. Slot eternally bald, and now they're back again. I think what we're seeing is obviously quite still a slightly fitful and inconsistent team that is capable of generating a really high level when it clicks, when the new signings and when the parts all fit together, and that's what we saw. I think the main issue, the main factor really is the fact that midfield appears to be back. I mean, McAllister has had he's been injured for parts of this season, and now he's back, and they've got Gravenberch and they've got Szoboszlai not playing it right back in the centre, and they just look like a more functional team. They look like a more functional, organised, confident, driven team with those three in the centre, and it's no secret, I think, that when they haven't had those three in tandem and fully fit, they haven't really looked like they haven't really been firing, and 1-0 could have been a lot more, to be honest. I thought Real Madrid were really poor. They looked totally bummed out. I don't know whether it was like a delayed reaction to the Clasico or whatever, but they were, the number of 50-50s where they just didn't even look like getting the ball. I thought Dean Howson he had an abysmal night, to be honest. But I think to a large extent, this is because Liverpool put so much pressure on them. The press looked organised. So yeah, are we declaring? Yeah, we're declaring them back. Are we? We're putting their name on the trophy.
I mean, you've got to say, Barry, because it was just such a brilliant performance, and like of those three in midfield, I thought Szoboszlai was just ridiculous in this game.
Yeah, he was brilliant. Yeah, it was a bad night for former Bournemouth players who went for big money during the summer, because Kirkes was dropped and Hussein was poor, or Howson, sorry, was poor. Szoboszlai was everywhere. He provided the assist for the goal. He had shots saved. Another fine performance from Thibaut Courtois in the Real Madrid goal. I thought he won for his English haters, even if he did emerge on the losing side. But Szoboszlai, I saw him being interviewed after this game. It was an interview Jamie Carragher conducted for that is it NBC banter show. But he said his favourite position is even deeper than the one he was playing last night. But he also stressed, I'm happy just to be on the pitch, so I don't really mind where I'm playing. But he has been outstanding. Everyone thought that the arrival of Wirtz would lead to him having to fight for his place and probably end up being a substitute. But he has made himself totally indispensable this season, wherever he ends up being on the pitch.
And actually, Nicky, Slot managed to get Wirtz into the team as well, and Wirtz played well as well.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like more or less everyone played well, didn't it? There wasn't particularly a player you looked at in their Liverpool lineup and thought had a weak performance. I think they completely owned the middle of the pitch, which was interesting when you take a a view on just the ball stats of the game. I think Real Madrid had like 62% of the ball, and it didn't feel like that. Obviously, that's just because of how the ball was used and the intensity, which I think Johnny was already referencing, just felt so much different on one side of this picture than the other. And to an extent, I do think that is the reality of this extended Champions League group. Real Madrid didn't need to beat Liverpool, but it still wasn't like they came here expecting or wanting to lose, and certainly didn't expect to lose like that, I would say, in a game where it felt like they were, in the end, only really close because of Thibaut Courtois, who was absolutely sensational. I thought his first half save from Szoboszlai, in particular, the one with his foot, was, the more you watched it, the more sensational it looked, because the body control to keep his foot there, and wasn't just one of those. I think sometimes when a keeper saves with their foot, it's just because they're close and they hit it into their foot, but he really didn't. He used his whole body there, so it felt like it was very much Courtois against the world for a lot of this game, and in the end, I suppose the Liverpool world won.
Aidan says, would a Super League be worth it if it means Conor Bradley can play against Real Madrid more often? I mean, it was perfect, Johnny, wasn't it? In that he is having this absolute worldie against Vinicius. Trent Alexander-Arnold isn't on the pitch and then finally comes on the pitch and then gets booed and doesn't really do anything. All the while, Vinicius is just kind of, I mean, Conor Bradley is kind of shepherding the ball out of play with Vinicius sort of tugging at him and everything. It was such a great, that whole theatre was perfect.
That was a great little subplot. I thought, Bradley was absolutely fantastic. And you see the sort of player he can be when he's fully fit, and he can cover that whole flank. He brings them a real energy and dynamism and a final ball. Then of course, you have the Trent entrance. I don't know what you call it, a little vignette, because it's hard to.
The Trentrance.
The Trentrance. There we go. There's a sub, a former sub talking, and because it's hard to say that he had very much impact on the game itself at all. I mean, almost none. But obviously, everyone was waiting for this. Everyone wanted to see what the reaction would be, and the reaction would be, I guess, what everyone assumed the reaction would be. I mean, this is, you don't get to take your. I'm not a Liverpool fan, but if I was a Liverpool fan and I have been dumped, I imagine it's kind of like being dumped, right? You don't get to take.
Did you relentlessly go around town booing?
Yeah, I mean the murals of her were defaced. I was shit talking her on the internet. I burned the jersey I had with her name on the back. Metaphor running dry here. But yeah, I mean,
the Hers bathrobe ended up in the fire.
But you don't get to take your dream move and move on and expect it to happen on good terms. I think that the amount of pearl clutching that has been, there's been over this. This is not how modern football fandom works, and yeah, there was a pantomime element to it, but there's also, I think, real, genuine feelings. He's not having a great time under Alonso, by all accounts. Alexander-Arnold this season, he's had to fight for his place with Valverde. It wouldn't surprise me if he saw coming back to Anfield as almost a way of making it real. This might be the point where it's all basically the whirlwind of the last 6 months finally sunk in. Yeah, this thing is totally done.
It was interesting that Alonso then throws him into the game in that situation, honestly, because the game was going so badly already for Madrid at that point. It's the 82nd minute. It's not like there's an expectation. Maybe there is an expectation. Maybe there's a hope from Alonso that this is going to galvanise him and he's going to come into the game and in 8 minutes provide this injection of, I can't wait to show those guys and turn it around. But it felt like, especially leaving it that late, I think maybe if you do it with half an hour it feels a bit different, but leaving it that late, it felt a bit like throwing him to the wolves to me. It felt a bit like you could have given him more of a chance than that if you wanted him to try to use this moment to get some uptick in something out of him, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost did it for the script writers. Almost better not to bring him on. Charlie says, would Max boo James Richardson if he ever came on as a panellist? I mean, I guess the thing is, Barry, booing is quite fun. And I suspect a lot of people who booed him actually quite like Trent Alexander-Arnold and were just having a bit of fun having a boo, because you don't get to boo very often, right?
Yeah.
And, unless you're an Everton
and
fan.
Yeah, I mean, there is genuine resentment among quite a sizable proportion of Liverpool fans over the manner in which he left them without the club being able to get a transfer fee. And that's fair enough, I suppose. I think I would probably be fine with it. He was a good servant. He was there a long time. He helped them win loads. I think the mural being defaced, and this seems to be, when men of a certain age get angry, they immediately reach for the paint pot and brush. I suppose it's better than going for a more dangerous weapon. If the worst thing you're going to do is deface a mural or paint a roundabout, have at it. It doesn't really bother me. Probably doesn't even really bother Trent. I'd be curious to know what he makes of it. He probably doesn't care. He probably had a fair idea what was going to happen. Some people lap that stuff up. Some people might be hurt by it. I'd imagine he's probably somewhere in between.
Yeah, what did you make of the Real Madrid performance, John? I mean, you've said already it was bad, but it just felt really, so many of their stars were bad in this game. In fact, so many of their players were bad in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we're talking about Liverpool as a slightly inconsistent team that still has a really high top level. I think you could say the same about Real Madrid. They looked, I thought, really good in the Clásico. They rose to their level for that game, and then but then obviously that there have been the Atletico performance, for example, where they've looked totally disjointed, and you can see that what Alonso is trying to impose on them, it's still coming together. There are still gaps in the system. There are still glitches in the mainframe, and this was one of those. I think the physicality and the quality of Liverpool, it just got in their faces really early on. And I'm not going to say they weren't up for it, but I think they're still not able to come up with the solutions in real time. I think if Alonso sends them out and he says this is going to happen, and then it's going to unfold like this, and then you do this and you do this, I think they know what they're doing. I think they can live with that. But when the game starts coming for them and they have to come up with solutions on the fly, you can tell that the base level of understanding and cohesion isn't quite there yet. So I think it's still a work in progress. I still really I rate Alonso very highly as a coach, and I think they have I think they have a lot of potential with the players they have. It's potentially very exciting what they're doing, but it's still not quite there yet.
Just to add, I mean, I don't know how much, of course, like when you get these European games made, and I'm sure definitely like Johnny and Baz and Max are all watching a lot more European football than maybe some people who just watch the Premier League are, right? And so like you have some of the background going on here that I don't know if everyone who's listening would, which is like the stuff with Vinicius Jr. in the Clásico and the apology that managed not to include an apology to Xabi Alonso after the game. And there has been some underpinning tension. Yes, they've had some great performances, but there is this feeling, to me at least, with Real Madrid that Xabi Alonso hasn't yet shown that he's got control of this squad. And I think that's always the question for Real Madrid managers coming in. It's never about, is there enough talent here to do something? It's never about, what is this squad capable of doing something? It's about how you can manage that. And I think that in general, it's always been the question coming in with Xabi Alonso. In general, in recent years, the most successful managers have often been those who have been able to be a bit more hands-off, who have been willing to let those big personalities and talents express themselves with a bit less control. And the Alonso experiment is fascinating because he isn't like that. He is going to be very much wanting it done his way. And so far, his way has been a bit less generous to Vinicius Jr. than the old way was. It has been more about Kylian Mbappe, who had a disappointing game last night as well. And there's just a bit of tension about exactly what that looks like for Madrid. There's just a bit of, despite all the winning, despite being 5 points clear in La Liga, is the camp as happy as it could be? And I think that maybe there are relatively few games in the season where they really get tested, and this is one of them. And maybe that's also part of the picture of a team not completely rowing in the same direction at the moment.
Matthew says this referee just unknowingly made himself a hero of the pod with this decision. He should get a segment named after him. This one is for the purists, Max. We are back. Yes, this is the fact that the penalty Well, it was a handball that was given against Chouameni from a Szoboszlai shot. Then the ref had to go to the screen because it was inside the box, not outside the box. And then he decided it wasn't a handball. Mark Clattenburg joined the comms to say he couldn't believe it was overturned, that Chouameni knew what he was doing. He was like 10 centimetres away. Alan Shearer said it should be given. People have lost their minds. This was the best moment of the game.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like that the referee had he felt like he had the autonomy to be able to. So obviously the VAR sent him to the screen. I think this is inside the area, and he's like, oh, I don't think this is a handball. It's like when someone sends you to the shops and to run some errands, and you decide to take it upon yourself to, I don't know, get some salted peanuts and maybe a little can for the train home. It's one of those where I think we've despaired quite a bit about how the handball law has been applied. I think there was another one in the Slavia Arsenal game which we might come to later.
Oh, we will.
This felt like common sense, and I do hate that term, but this felt like common sense reigning finally.
Yeah, how Clattenburg can say, honestly, that Chouameni knows what he's doing. I mean, he's so close. Anyway, Istvan Kovacs will forever be, whenever there is a good VAR decision, we will sing his name. Tom says, is there a pitch that can contain Micky Van de Ven? Spurs 4, Copenhagen 0. And Barry, Micky Van de Ven scored. It is a ridiculous goal. It is absolutely ludicrous.
Now, I think Palina deserves some credit for the assist, Max. First off the bat.
Of course.
It was him that robbed the ball from Mohamed El Yunusi. Gave the ball to Van de Ven, and he kind of set off between two defenders at top speed, 0 to 60, as quick as Wesley Fofana Lamborghini on the hard shoulder. Skipped around the third defender. This is all before the halfway line, then burst between two more and has a crack from just, I think it was just outside the box or just inside, and boom, yeah, what a goal. And no one saw it coming, really. I don't know if he even saw it coming. It was like a cheat code or just this turbo charge upfield. And yeah, he was obviously delighted with himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's some finish. After all that way, you sort of think you have to score this. Like, you just can't not score this. I'm trying to think, Nicky, like, it's like, what is the best kind of goal? I mean, this was obviously a ludicrous question, but because there's something about the way the crowd, like the crescendo with the crowd, as every man he passes, and, like, it's just building and building to this moment. It's just, I wonder if this is the best type of goal, or maybe one that comes out of nowhere. I don't know.
I think best type of goal is always going to be very subjective, isn't it? I've got a soft spot for a volley off the underside of the bar. There's something about that satisfying thump of the ball off the underside of the bar that always feels good. But I mean, a coast to coast is always magic, and when it's a centre back, it's even better, isn't it? Because I mean, gosh, it's a very long time since I played any football, let alone 11-a-side football. But that feeling when you are a defender and you start running and you suddenly see the pitch in front of you is like a bit open. You think, hang on, could go somewhere here. It never ended for me like it did for Van de Ven, let me tell you. But it was a brilliant goal. I really liked the way that Joe Cole was framing it on the goals show for TNT. He just said it's why you go to watch a football game, and it is, right. Like that is, especially for those of us who watch a lot of football games, those moments when someone just takes it onto their own shoulders and does something that's completely outside the frame of what like they're trained to do every day, the systems and the structure that are so important to top level football. It's just magic, isn't it? And it was a magic goal. Would be a magic goal for a centre forward, but the fact that it is not a centre forward definitely makes it a bit better.
Much of the criticism Thomas Frank has been shipping this season, or since taking over from Spurs, is that they're not entertaining anymore. I don't think Tottenham fans can have any complaints about that match last night, because it was very entertaining. I mean, the fourth goal was superb as well, I thought. It looked for a moment like Christian Romero was going to say, hey, I want in on this action. A counter-attack from a Copenhagen corner. That was a really good goal as well. Just a really fun game, very entertaining. Copenhagen didn't offer much in the way of opposition, but as they say, you can only beat what's in front of you.
Yeah, I wonder what Andrew's thinking, seeing Van de Ven and Romero up there. Look, I know it is only Copenhagen, and with all due respect to Copenhagen, Johnny, but there were signs. Xavi Simons had a good game. Kolo Muani missed some chances, but looked like a good centre forward. And I suppose those are the things that, if you're Thomas Frank, will give you hope after, especially the weekend against Chelsea.
Yeah, so I didn't watch the Chelsea game live. I came to it later, so I saw the discourse first. I saw lots of people saying this is the worst Spurs performance of the season. This is worse than anything they did last season. I saw some people saying it's one of the worst Premier League performances of all time, certainly since they started measuring it. And so I saw all that first, and I came to the performance, and I actually watched it later, and I thought, well, it was obviously horrifically bad. But it did also feel a little bit like a little bit of a freak show, not something, the individual errors, that just sort of dribbling it into Chelsea players. It didn't feel like that was representative, certainly of what I'd seen from Spurs this season. So it almost felt like just one of those horror shows where you say, okay, that was a horror show. Let's draw a line under it. Now, Copenhagen are not Chelsea, right? They're not. They're struggling in the Danish Superliga. They've been leaking goals. They've been lacking a lot of confidence. They've had a lot of injuries, and Spurs are a streaky sort of team. They're still, again, as we see it at this point of the season, there are lots of teams that are still working things out. But that I think was a lot more representative of what Frank is trying to do there. I think he's, there's been a little bit of talk about how Spurs' league position is a little bit false, how the underlying numbers aren't quite matching up to what they're putting up in terms of results in the table. But that is the sort of performance that really just changes the mood and changes the narrative and changes the weather again. And just in terms of this competition, given the fact that the league table is going to be so tight and so many teams are going to be level on points, a big win like that is really useful for goal difference. I think you're going to see teams that go out on goal difference or teams that make it through on goal difference. So again, from that aspect.
Okay, that'll do for part one. Part two will begin with Arsenal's win in Prague. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. Nicky, what more to say about Arsenal? A comfortable win and a clean sheet. I mean, we're running out of things to say, and it's the 5th of November, so they need to do something different, like in the next few months, or we're really stuck.
Well, I mean, I suppose the only place to go, Max, is after the in no way hyperbolic coverage I saw in the last week or so, asking if the title race was already over. I suppose the only question to ask now is the Champions League already over?
It's already over, yes.
Because Arsenal won another game without conceding. There's been some, in my opinion, absolute nonsense that's been happening in the coverage in the last few weeks, with people deciding that a season can end in November, but Arsenal are playing very, very solid football at the moment. And I do understand, because I'm a fan myself, I do understand that feeling of when you're a fan of anyone else and you're watching this team that looks like a juggernaut, you're like, just show us something, show us some crack of vulnerability. And right now Arsenal aren't. I don't think Slavia Prague was ever particularly the place that they were likely to show that crack of vulnerability. It's not the place that you expect them to go and show some, but they certainly didn't. And I think it's fair to say that there might have been past versions that might have had a different night there. Going away from home, the first little bit of the game was they were a little bit slow to come into the game. I think it's an exaggeration to say it was a little bit wobbly, because it wasn't really like they gave up any chances in that time particularly. They just didn't immediately sweep their opponents away. They did need, I don't know, I think it is a penalty in the current rules, but a very boring kind of penalty, I suppose, to get the lead in the first half. But when you're this hard to score a goal against, and they are really stinking hard to score a goal against, it becomes a lot easier to win football matches. And when you've got, I think the other thing that's just big picture, even though everyone is probably bored of hearing about a set piece as well, another thing that is big picture, definitely a takeaway from this round, is Liverpool obviously scored from a set piece against Real Madrid. And when you get into the underlying numbers, you see that actually Real Madrid, there was, I think this is the Athletic, I saw it in Real Madrid. If you look how many chances they've given away from set pieces, if they were in the Premier League, they'd be like the third or fourth worst team at giving away chances from set pieces. So that's something that clearly they've targeted. It's something that clearly Arsenal target in every game. And seeing a game like this against a team where you've got some absolute giants. I mean, the centre forward who's just like towering over all your defenders, and going away on a night like that where you think, well, you know where the quality is tilted in this matchup. You know Arsenal are a team that have more quality in absolute terms because the money is with Arsenal. It's just the boring reality of football. But the fact that you go there and you're also the better team at set pieces feels like a shift from where they might have been in the past and in less successful chapters, because they're dominating even the parts of the game that the lesser team might in the past have fancied itself of being able to control. But Arsenal were great. They even got to bring on Max Dowman and have him be the youngest to play in Champions League history. So pretty great night all around for Arteta and Arsenal, really, isn't it?
Like we said, just show us something. I mean, you could at least let the opposition have a shot, is what I was thinking. just one shot for one team. One shot a month the opposition get, don't they?
They've won 10 in a row now. They've not conceded in 8. They've scored 18 since they last conceded a goal. Yeah, Slavia Prague got a penalty, and Arsenal's players were furious. Because it shouldn't have been a penalty, but they really don't want to concede a goal. And the penalty was correctly overturned. But they just love keeping clean sheets. And sadly, that'll all come to a sorry end on Saturday when Sunderland, they have to go to Sunderland, and Granit Xhaka scores against them, as is written in the stars.
I need to say again, even though everyone knows, I think, what he is to football, it's still great that Mikel Merino is scoring 2 goals again and just being the guy when the guy who's meant to be the guy isn't there, right? He does keep doing it for someone who I think gets probably more flack than he deserves, given it's not like he's shown up there with some ego about himself saying, look, I'm supposed to be this guy. I think his contribution has still been absolutely brilliant. And exactly as Baz says, the thing that marks great teams apart sometimes is that furious competitiveness, and Arsenal have it in absolute buckets, don't they?
Yeah. PSG won, Bayern 2. Bayern, speaking of teams who are doing quite well, Johnny, have won all 16 of their games in all competitions so far. It doesn't seem far-fetched to say in that first half, because obviously the sending off of Luis Diaz changed things. In the first half, they sort of destroyed PSG, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was the performance of the night, to be honest, and really a performance of, it was almost 2 great performances rather than one, because the way they hunted PSG in the first half, and then after the sending off, after PSG then pull one back, the absolute, the rear guards, the clearances, the clearing of their lines. I thought Konrad Laimer at right back, who's normally a midfielder, but at right back was absolutely incredible. I thought Upamecano was fantastic, and yeah, I mean, just in terms of PSG, they haven't been setting Ligue 1 alight this season. They haven't been setting the Champions League alight this season, and something does seem to be missing from last season. I know Dembele hasn't really been starting for them. He's been struggling with injuries, and I think you see how crucial he was to the way, not just in terms of his goals, but his build-up. But it's also kind of the speed of pass and the speed of thought, and that little flash of lightning that made them so devastating last season. That's something is missing from there, and I think Bayern have really, they managed to pick out those. To pick at those weaknesses. I thought, did you see the second goal where basically Diaz takes it off Marquinhos? It was absolutely shambolic, and Marquinhos.
Well, you said speed of thought. It was like someone had accidentally unplugged Marquinhos. He was there for hours.
He was buffering.
But he looks over his shoulder. I mean, I don't see any way he can't see Diaz coming. I just think he can't get his feet in order. And I think that epitomised the difference between them last night.
Barry, the Luis Diaz red card, I thought it was soft. Producer Joel said it was a horror challenge. Maybe I'm just a dinosaur. I don't know. He does jump into it, but I don't know where you sit on that decision.
I'd be somewhere in the middle. I thought it was nasty. I think he jumped into it and he caught Hakimi like a scissors, basically, and seemed to squeeze to deliberately hurt him, and he has hurt him. Hakimi left the ground on crutches wearing a plastic boot. He was very upset when he had to go off. Obviously, he plays for Morocco. The AFCON is in Morocco in December. And he had the air about him of a man who thought maybe the AFCON jig at home is up for him. Yeah, it could be ligaments, could be broken. I don't know.
Dr. Barry, how many weeks are you giving him, Dr. Barry?
I'd say a couple of months. Yeah,
right.
But he might get lucky. He might get lucky.
Okay. Producer Joel says I edited out that he'd said it was very clumsy and the outcome is horrific, not the intent. And to be fair, I didn't see the outcome from the highlights that
it's a yellow, isn't it? It's a yellow, but exacerbated by the fact that it was quite a bad injury.
Yeah.
And I think also exacerbated by him looking really upset about it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we haven't really talked about Luis Diaz at all, Nicky, when we talked about Bayern, because Kane is having a ridiculous season, because Elise has done so much. But he is a brilliant footballer, right? And we've talked about actually Liverpool missing him more than how he's benefited Bayern Munich.
Yeah, I think he's been really important to Bayern Munich at the start of the season. I think as great at Kane is at leading the line, a little bit of control in that area behind the attack is really important. And I think that I've heard people talk about this with Bayern, that the moving on from Thomas Müller has been this protracted thing that's gone on, and perhaps he's really helping with that area of the pitch and a little bit of leadership in that area of the pitch as well, to be honest. And yeah, he's having a strong start to this season. Bayern having a strong start to this season, and obviously before he got sent off was having a great night last night as well.
Juve won, Sporting won. You wanted to talk about Spalletti, Nicky.
Yeah, well, it's just a fascinating moment, isn't it? I mean, Spalletti coming back in, obviously got plenty to prove to people after a pretty dismal time in charge of the Italian national team, ending, of course, with that absolute shellacking 3-0 by Norway. And I think I've had some reservations about how this was going to unfold, because I think that there's a lot of much deeper issues at Juventus at this point than just the manager, and they certainly hadn't started the season well under Igor Tudor. And I think it's far too soon to draw any conclusions about Juventus. They didn't win last night. Clearly, they drew with Sporting, and both they and Napoli, who also drew last night, really are going to have to start winning some games at some point in this group, because they really could get themselves in trouble and not make it through even to out of the top 24 if they're not careful. But I have really liked some of the stuff that Spalletti's done so far. He started with Koopmeiners at left centre-back again in this game, same as he had at the weekend. And I'm not sure if that's a long-term gambit. Koopmeiners did his best work for Atalanta as a midfielder who did a lot of running on from midfield to be behind the attack. Is kind of one of the symbols of everything that's been done wrong at Juventus in the last couple of years, because they spent a lot of money on players who, I mean, some of them aren't even there, like Douglas Luiz, who's a 50 million euro player who isn't even there. Obviously, there's been players from the next gen squad they've let leave, like Dean Huijsen, who's gone on to do better things, Housen. And then you've got Koopmeiners, who was signed for a lot of money and hasn't been good, hasn't left, but it just hasn't been good. Moving him to that left centre-back position, I thought, that's a bit out there, isn't it? But they won at the weekend. And afterwards he said, part of why I've put him there, he said he's played there for his national team before, so it's not completely out there. But part of why I put him there is because I want to send the message to my players that we're not trying to draw these games. We're putting attacking players on the pitch because we intend to take the game to teams and try to win. And whether that's going to work, I don't know. But I do think it's an interestingly bold approach, especially for someone who, again, had such a bad time with Italy. He's come in trying to do something quite aggressive, and I'm going to enjoy watching it with Spalletti. He's always produced teams that are fun to watch. He's also always given incredibly chippy press conferences. I think it'll be an interesting chapter.
Elsewhere last night, Atleti beat Union Saint-Gilloise 3-1. Monaco won 1-0 in Bodo. Olympiacos won. PSV won. Napoli drew 0-0 with Eintracht Frankfurt. A bit of a shame that Eintracht Frankfurt, their 5-1 either way record is over. Barry, Johnny, anything that piqued your interest for any of those games?
Well, I thought Atletico were quite lucky to beat Union Saint-Gilloise. They were 2-1 up. Louis Patrice had a brilliant opportunity to equalise for Union deep in injury time. header, entire goal to aim at. He just couldn't get any power behind his header, put it straight into Oblak's hands. The other thing and then Atletico went upfield and scored to make it 3-1. So Union could probably feel a bit hard done by there. Ross Sykes, formerly of Accrington Stanley, got to score Union's goal at the Wanda Metropolitana, which was probably a career highlight for him, one imagines, even though his team lost. And the other thing to take from that game is Antoine Griezmann's mullet is a thing of just quite extraordinary beauty. The shag, the volume. He looks like he should be playing as a ruckman for Collingwood in the AFL.
100%.
It's just superb. And
yes.
I could never pull off a mullet. Not many can. I've seen Johnny Liew pull one off before, but Griezmann's is a thing of extraordinary beauty.
Barry, maybe you could grow a mullet for your half marathon. I mean, I guess it could slow you down a tiny bit, and we don't need any of that. We don't need any more air resistance. Our commentator that I was watching called Ross Sykes Big Man Sykes, and for a small moment, I just thought he had been christened Big Man Sykes, and then to turn into such an enormous man, I was utterly delighted. Napoli 0, Eintracht 0. I mean, it's interesting after Napoli were thrashed by PSV, wasn't it, in the last round, that they didn't get a victory in this one. And, Conte's terrible record in Europe, Mickey.
It gets to a point where it's almost hard to explain quite why Conte's teams are so consistently bad in Europe. It's not like it's been a year or two or a moment. It's like a decade of just consistently different clubs managing to not produce anything like the same football in Europe as they do domestically. And this was such a frustrating watch because Frankfurt, you alluded to the 5-1s either way in the Champions League, Max. I think they'd conceded 11 goals in their first 3 Champions League games. They'd conceded 19 goals in their first 9 Bundesliga games. They are not a good team defensively. They're a team that's got some things going for them going forwards. They're a team that can attack you, but they are not a good team defensively. And the fact that Napoli really, until a final, left it too late, throw everything at the wall push when they could have scored. And McTominay probably should have scored late on. They really didn't look to exploit that at all. It's hard to explain. Napoli are definitely imperfect. They are, I would say, behind where they were last season. There was a lot of talk when De Bruyne got injured that maybe they'll get back to where they were last season because now McTominay can move back inside, and he has been so much the heart of the team over the last year or so. I think that people have maybe underestimated that De Bruyne, even though the dynamic between them wasn't perfect, was helping create scoring chances in the first part of the season. So I think people may have underestimated that. I haven't got all the numbers in front of me right now for quite how disappointing Conte's European record is, but it's something else when you look into it. When you look at the clubs he's had and the results, they are really hard to explain quite how poor they've been. And I think Napoli are in serious danger in this group, more than Juventus, of finding a way to stuff it up.
All right, that'll do for part 2. Part 3 will begin with the draw between Sunderland and Everton on Monday night. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Barry, you predicted a comfortable win for your mob against Everton. It was a draw in the end. It was really intense. It was full of robust challenges, kind of what you'd expect from Sunderland-Everton, I think.
Yeah, it was a weird game. Sunderland started really, really badly, as bad as I've seen them this season. Could not hold on to the ball, kept giving it away. Iliman Njai scored a lovely solo goal to put Everton in front, and they missed a couple of excellent chances to extend their lead. Jack Grealish hit the post with a shot from outside the area. Tierno Barry missed an absolute sitter on the 28-minute mark, and that just sparked a complete turnaround, that miss. And Sunderland dominated from then on, equalised just after half-time with a very fortuitous Granit Xhaka shot that took a horrific deflection that completely wrong-footed Jordan Pickford. I think he'd probably have saved it otherwise. And then it was all Sunderland for the second half, really. I think they had 16 shots after that Tierno Barry miss, and probably should have won, I think. But point is all right considering how bad they were in the first half hour. They welcome Arsenal to the Stadium of Light on Saturday, and I don't think people are expecting it to be the straightforward Arsenal win they might have a couple of months ago when they were looking at the fixture list, but Arsenal may well be too good for them. Everton are a funny team. I've said this repeatedly. They're a half-decent striker away from being a half-decent team, but the two they have, Beto and Barry, are hopeless. They have a goal between them this season, and unless one of them starts firing, I'd still worry for Everton because they're just awful. They're so bad. The chances they miss.
Poor Barry. What do you make of Everton, Johnny?
Yeah, it's almost like they have a really solid back five, and then they have they've added some flair in the middle with the likes of Dewsbury Hall and Grealish, and you have Ndiaye who's I think a really, really top player, and then they get into the final third, and it's like, oh gosh, what do we do now? There's like it's like that they've spent so much time working on how to progress the ball, and once it gets into the final third, I think Barry has a lot of potential to him. It did really well in La Liga last season. Beto is Beto. He's a very Everton striker, a guy who will score maybe one legendary goal that everybody remembers in about 28 games. He's going to end up with an Everton record of about 13 goals in 112 appearances, 74 as substitute. That sort of record. I think slightly worrying how little ambition they showed on Monday night. I thought, especially after they scored the goal, that they just sat back and this is. I know Sunderland have been good this season. It's also a mark of how much respect Everton paid them. That they showed that they could actually control a game in which they had the ball rather than simply sitting tight and trying to hit on the break. They were the ones who were having to make the running, and I thought that showed a side of Sunderland that maybe we haven't seen so much from them this season.
A mate of mine, Tom, who's a Sunderland fan, messaged me to say, does this mean we're a proper established mid-table Premier League club again, on the fact that Sunderland have formally written to the Premier League and PGMOL seeking clarification as to why they were not awarded a penalty in last night's 1-1 draw with Everton? Sunderland are keen to hear more on both the on-field decision and the VAR rationale, which determined no offence occurred or no further review from the referee Thomas Bramall was required after Michael Keane's handball in the 73rd minute. Give me strength, world.
Not quite enough AI, I think. That there needs to be a little bit more AI, and then they can call themselves solid mid-table Premier League stalwarts.
I mean, I've no complaints over that. It was a Mukiele cross that hit Michael Keane's outstretched hand. I've no big deep problem with it not being given as a penalty, but they are often given as penalties. So again, we're discussing the handball law again in a podcast, and this is the second
Where's
time
the consistency? Where's the consistency? Is all you want is the consistency in a sport where no two situations ever replicate.
Yeah. Well, we want consistency and we want common sense, but you can't have both. So just cherry pick whichever you want as it suits you.
Well, Wolves wanted Gary O'Neill. They can't have him because they were in talks with him over the weekend. And on Monday, before he pulled out, he was finalising his backroom staff. Club felt he was the ideal candidate to galvanise the squad. I mean, the fans definitely didn't. Wolves had maintained dialogue with other candidates. There was a belief that O'Neill would take charge this week. No clear reason why he had a change of heart, unless he logged into social media, I guess.
I'd say that might have had something to do with it. There is talk that he wanted a longer contract than they were prepared to offer him. But I imagine, having seen what happened to Russell Martin at Rangers and Ange at Forest, he probably went, nah, I don't fancy that. And I think if he had taken the job, his first game is away at Chelsea, I think. So he's already on the back foot before a ball's even been kicked, you'd imagine.
Don't know who the next. I heard somewhere that, it says here that Eric Ten Hag at 5-2 and Rob Edwards at 3-1. I did see somewhere that Sam Allardyce was the favourite, and I was like, yeah, I'll definitely take that. Why not? Now, Johnny, you wanted to talk about Mary Earps. An extract from her book featured in The Guardian on Friday drew a lot of attention. She says she protested to Sarita Wiegman that bad behaviour was being rewarded when rival goalkeeper Hannah Hampton was restored to the England side. It was an interesting chat about this on The Guardian Women's Football Weekly, so download that wherever you get your podcast. But you wanted to talk about that situation more broadly, about what this means for how women's football is covered.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, obviously, like Faye, Susie and Sophie covered it, the substance of what Earp said, really well on the women's pod this week. I think it's quite interesting. It's a bit like, when two players start squaring up on the pitch and everyone, starts clutching their pearls and shaking their, I know nobody wants to see that. And secretly everybody does want to see that. I think one of the really interesting things this has shown about, I think, women's football discourse and coverage is that the extent to which this sport, I think a lot more than men's football, is dependent on reputation and PR, where you're almost having to build a personal brand at the same time as you're trying to build a playing identity and a football career in a team sport. We see this so often where individual players become, they get elevated into this huge stature overnight, which is basically what happened to her. She got thrust into the limelight really from nowhere almost, winning BBC Sports Personality and being on the front page and all of that. And I don't think anything, certainly in women's football, prepares you for that kind of elevation, and the fact that it is by definition transitory, right? I don't know the details of Mary Earps' personal finance, but I'd say she's not set up for life, and she knows that this is a very, very narrow window. Unlike men's players, you're not earning millions and millions of pounds, and you are struggling for attention in a very competitive attention economy. And I think that the pressures that we put women's players under to absolutely milk every last drop of capital and cultural clout and attention, and the way we demand them to sell themselves and build their brand and sell their bodies almost is, I think it's something, it's a part of women's football that is very, very different from men's football. And I think it is in many ways quite exploitative, a game that I think ultimately doesn't really benefit anyone except the people getting content out of it. So I don't want to comment too much on the rights and wrongs of what Earp said about Hampton and whatever, and the details of that. But I think the way that discourse has been shaped, and I think the toxicity of a lot of it, I think it says a lot about the attention economy of women's football and the way people follow it.
The counter, she wrote the stuff, didn't she? But do you think she's under pressure? She's playing because she understands, right? If we all know that if you write a football book and you say, I don't like them, you'll sell more books than I thought. Everyone was lovely to play with, and we all had a few bust ups, but that's what happens.
Yeah, no, she's playing this game. She's.
I'm not certain that it is true that everyone understands that, Max. And I think that's like an easy thing to say when we sit here and cover it every day and do all this. But the assumption that all footballers, women or men, are fully understanding of the media environment, I think is unrealistic. And I think you could even point to just your last night, a slightly terse exchange between Wayne Rooney and Van Dijk in the post-game interview for Liverpool's win. For I think even someone who's been at the centre as much of the men's football world as Rooney was, perhaps not quite realising how his podcast was going to get listened to and responded to by real footballers, which real footballers, I mean current footballers, I don't know why I used the word real there. I think it's actually in that part of it is, if anything, is like quite a repetitive scene that you see. Footballers will spend their time as professionals lamenting how ex-pros talk about them, then as soon as they become ex-pros they do the same thing. It's like a pattern that goes on and on. I think I agree to bring back to Johnny's point. I agree the nature of women's football, because it doesn't get the same amount of coverage, doesn't get the same amount of eyeballs on it all the time, means that your career is distilled so much more down into those moments when the world is watching. And of course, big international moments, tournaments are those moments when the world is watching, which is why, as Johnny was saying, Earps really shot into, because she didn't come from nowhere, actually. She played really well for a really long time, but what Johnny means is in the public perception, for a lot of people who don't pay attention to that, she shot into public consciousness very quickly. And I don't think it's completely alien and unrelated to what can happen in men's football, but I just think it's so much more intense because, sadly, still the amount of time that most football fans are, I don't know, maybe the most is the wrong way of putting it, but the time when you have a huge audience is smaller than it is for the men, is the reality of it. The men have a huge audience at the top level all the time, whereas the women only get it for those big events. And so your window is much shorter and much more intense. And I think that Johnny said all the rest of it very well, so I need to repeat it.
On to another business, on the subject of benches and the most expensive bench. And producer Joel was trying to think of the most expensive bench of footballers, and I was just trying to think of the most expensive bench. And we found one on the Hudson River. Well, not in the river, but near it, in a park that was very expensive. Sean Bon Jovi has sent me this. Scarborough Station is home to a Grade 2 listed bench, said to be the longest bench in the world. It seats 239 people. He says it's basically priceless. So thank you for that. And many people got in touch on this subject. Brad said, will Max and Baz be seeking a return of a favour from the Mayor-elect of New York? Clearly the endorsement of Max and Baz via Football Weekly in September paid dividends for Zoran Mamdani. Tom says Zoran Mamdani won the election.
Yeah.
He did, following his Football Weekly exposure.
That's how I discovered.
Who are you electing next and where? It's another one, Barry, isn't it? You know, you come on this podcast, you get elected.
Yeah, well, I hope he does a better job than the last man we got elected. Up your game, Keir.
Look, it's not Talk Politics. For more on, if you need any more reaction to the New York mayoral race, go to Today in Focus. But I think we pretty much covered it in all the detail you need just there. Whatever it is, more proof that this podcast runs the world. And that'll do for today. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Johnny.
Thanks.
Thanks, Nicky.
Thanks.
Cheers, Baz.
Thank you.
Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Phil Maynard.
This is The Guardian.